Hello, I'm the Reverend Alan V. Harris, and I am honored and delighted you have invited me into the next phase of your search for a regional minister of the capital area. Let me begin by taking the opportunity to thank the Reverend Dr. Martha Brown and the other members of the Regional Minister Search Committee for the Christian Church capital area. I celebrate your faithful dedication to this important work to envision a bold new future for your region. And I acknowledge the hard work that goes into making this process true to God's call to your region. We pray for God's wisdom, guidance, and grace to be with us all. And now on to your questions. You begin by asking about my family of origin. And for this question, I feel like I need to pull out a flow chart to best illustrate my family's complex structure and quirky qualities. I will refrain from doing that, but suffice it is to say that my family of origin is a multifaceted and merged family. My mother and her first husband had 2 children, my sister and my oldest brother. Her husband and their biological father died while serving in the military in World War II. A few years later, my mother met my father, also a military man, and after he adopted my older siblings, they gave birth to my brother and then to me. Unfortunately, my father also died quite early on, leaving my mom with 2 young adults, a toddler, and me on the way, to be born only a few months after my father's death. Thus, I come from a rich and complex blended family. And there are 2 ways, at least, in which I believe this has helped to shape me into the person and minister that I have become. Most certainly, this life experience has given me a deep understanding, as well as a heart for families in our churches that are blended and even more complex than my own. But more pointedly, I expect that the perspectives I gain from my own family will aid me greatly in working with the diversity of churches that create a blended region. New church starts, churches coming into the region from other denominations, older, more established churches, even some of the historic churches your region has, as well as congregations from a wide variety of theological and liturgical backgrounds. But there's a second way in which this family of origin assists me in ministry. My mother was a strong, self-sufficient woman. She had to be as a single mother. And she taught me the value of both independence and interconnectedness. And this has helped me greatly in being the solo pastor of a local congregation, Franklin Circle Christian Church here in Cleveland, Ohio. And I believe it will help me immensely as a regional minister with only 1 part-time staff person beside myself. Furthermore, I watch my mom draw upon all the resources from within her and within the community around her to help make her family stronger and healthier, reaching out to other family members as well as to the local Disciples of Christ congregation, First Christian Church of Roswell, New Mexico. Finding existing resources and connecting them is one of my gifts, and it comes from watching my mother work diligently and lovingly to sustain her family in the face of otherwise overwhelming circumstances. You then ask about experiences in the course of my ministry that I treasure. There are so many from which to choose. But let me start at the beginning. My calling into ministry dawned upon me like a long, slow spring sunrise. Some of its early genesis can certainly be found in ongoing and deep spiritual experiences that I had in camps and conferences as a youth. From my daily morning watch at Tres Rios Christian Growth Center in southeastern New Mexico, sitting summer after summer on the very same well-worn log arched over the Black River, I remember feeling the presence of God sitting next to me, helping me to sort out the biblical conundrums and theological questions my young mind had confronted that week at camp. as well as those personal struggles which seem that they could only be solved by divine intervention. Likewise, my heart goes back to that well-worn rock on the edge of Lake Brownwood at the Disciples Conference Center in Texas, where, as a new young leader in the church, I had bigger questions, and they were about who was I to lead God's people. It was, in fact, at Lake Brownwood that a minister who was visiting camp for the day sat across the dining hall table from me, and after hearing all the protestations I had, said simply, "Alan, there is no doubt in my mind you were called to ministry. Why are you running from it?" Well, that night, as all of us conferees lay on the warm concrete of the outdoor basketball court, I looked deep into the wisdom of the dark night sky and asked God and myself, why me? Only to hear the gentle and yet confident voice, why not you? This echoes similar challenges given to Moses and Esther, Jeremiah, and Paul, to name a few. This directly influences what I have been doing here in Ohio, both as co-director of the young adult program in the region and as a member of the Commission on the Ministry, in nurturing young people as well as more experienced folk in their discernment as to whether or not God is calling them into ministry, and what the shape of that ministry might be in order to best serve God's people in the 21st century. It also gives me a passion for sustaining our camp and conference centers for long-term ministry and service. I also treasure the times in my life where my abiding faith in God and my desire to follow Jesus wherever He leads me has provoked me to demonstrate a faithful response in the public arena. Whether I'm writing letters to city, state, national, or even world leaders, lobbying in the halls of legislation on behalf of those whose voices are overwhelmed and unheard, to putting my very body in line to protest injustice and inequality, I have always done so drawing from the depths of my faith. The place of public protest is fundamental to my spiritual health and my faith journey. And this became real for me when I was arrested during the protests following the shooting of Amadou Diallo, an unarmed 23-year-old immigrant from Guinea, by 4 police officers in 1999 in New York City. After careful consultation with the leadership of the congregation I was serving and a great deal of prayer and study, I chose to walk with the other clergy and faith leaders to block the doors of the headquarters of the New York City Police and then be jailed with them. The most profound part of that experience was the community that emerged in the midst of the protest, both on the street and in the jail cell. I found haunting the recurring chant of the throngs of protesters as we counted slowly from 1 to 41 the number of shots fired at Amadou, 19 of which hit his body. Nothing was more heart-wrenching for me than to experience how vast the number 41 could be. Howard Thurman once wrote, "Community is the native climate of the human spirit. I find profound community in being in solidarity with those who are oppressed, marginalized, and even broken." These experiences would make working with the Disciples Center for Public Witness and the Refugee and Immigration Ministries, as well as those local congregations called to prophetic ministries, a natural and rewarding part of my ministry as your regional minister. Then you ask about some reasons I am excited about being among the top 3 candidates for the position of regional minister. I feel profoundly called to this ministry at this time in the church's history. Most everyone is aware that in the life of the Church of Jesus Christ, this is an era of seismic uncertainty and tectonic transition. There are challenges that we all face, but I am energized by the possibility of helping my clergy colleagues and congregations of the capital area through this difficult and most perplexing time. And in large part, my energy comes from my call from God to be a bridge builder, a connector, a facilitator, especially between the generations, but also linking people across the great divides of our nation and culture, such as race and gender, age, economic diversity, national origin, sexual orientation and gender identity, and abilities. My life has been devoted to Isaiah 56:7, when God declares, "My house shall be a house of prayer for all peoples." As your regional minister, I will help you and your congregations chart a course for the future that will be ever rooted in God's timeless call to go and make disciples, and yet will allow for the flexibility and adaptability that this new technological and social media-driven age demands. I have been so disheartened by the quick fix and one-size-fits-all guru-centered approach that has so often taken over the time and attention of the mainline Protestant church, and admittedly my own attention also. We all fear being irrelevant, outdated, obsolete, and perhaps even found wanting in our faithfulness. They are real concerns and they are daunting. But let's be clear, there is no simplistic nor easy answer to what the church of today should do and be to be the church of tomorrow. And this means, quite frankly, that I am not the solution to our church's dilemma. But what I am is one who can help empower you, to help equip you, help connect you, so that together we can find, if not the answer, then at least the next step to which God is calling us. I find enormous joy in seeing others flourish and thrive, and knowing that new opportunities are being created or existing possibilities being unearthed and shared gives me immense satisfaction and great hope. And finally, you ask if there's any other information I think is important for you to have in order to get to know me better. Up to this point, I've not talked much about my relationship with my partner and husband, Craig Hoffman. Craig is an ordained minister of the United Church of Christ. Craig and I are approaching the 25th anniversary of our Holy Union. We've called each other partner for years, but just over a year ago, while visiting Washington, D.C., we took the opportunity to go over the river into Maryland and get married. As of December 30th, 2013, we are now legally married, and I have the honor and the privilege of calling Craig my husband. I mention Craig because I want you to know how very much I learn from him. In addition to serving in chaplaincy settings, he has worked many years as an administrator in the church. First in a local congregation, and then as a database administrator in the Financial Development Office of the national offices of the UCC. And now is the Development Associate for a nonprofit here in Cleveland. He's also served as the treasurer of his local congregation. And this amazing man brings a pastor's heart, like mine, to the bureaucratic and administrative aspects of the church. I have learned from him many of the best practices I now know and use around clear and up-to-date bookkeeping, around treating donors as living, breathing, and caring human beings, around writing effective fundraising letters, and the critical importance of timely thank you notes, as well as the necessity of a well-organized financial paper trail. I'm watching him now move into the arena of face-to-face donor relations, and I am in awe of him. Having observed him carefully, I have learned through his living example that stewardship and fundraising and database management and financial accountability are all about relationships. Along with my own good managerial skills and my growth as a supervisor and senior pastor, Craig has helped me to be a much better financial manager and has improved my development sensibilities dramatically. Well, that's probably enough for now. There's always so much more to share. That will come soon enough, I trust. Let me again thank you all so much for your time and attention, and I look forward to our further conversation. God bless us all.